Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. The first part of the bill in section 50.001 talks about how public institutions of higher education must be committed to creating an environment of intellectual inquiry and academic freedom, intellectual diversity, so that all students are respected and educated regardless of race, sex, or ethnicity. And so what this amendment does, it will include in part of the bill that the governing board will ensure that the institutions do not hire a person with known ties to a hate group or domestic terrorist organizations. And I want to talk about that because the DPS, Texas Domestic Terrorism Threat Assessment, in January 2020 said domestic terrorism poses a persistent and varied threat to the state of Texas. One of the main types of domestic terrorism includes racially motivated. It cited the example where the recent the loss of the 22 lives were suspected domestic terrorism opened fire on families in El Paso. It also discusses, based on prevalence of recently conducted attacks nationwide, that white, racially motivated is currently the most violently active domestic terrorism type. This is from DPS. On university campuses, there have been instances where groups, individuals are posting flyers across a university. For example, at Texas State University, there was a large banner hanging from the library that read, "America is a white nation." It was 10 feet wide by 3 feet tall, and it was by an organization that was a fascist white nationalist group.
Mr. Speaker?
Ms. Collier, for what
will
purpose? Will the gentle lady yield for questions?
Yield for questions?
Yes.
She yields for questions.
Okay. So, I appreciate you bringing this amendment because we want to make sure that our universities are being fair and even and not hiring individuals who participate or belong to domestic terroristic organizations. Now, what we learned from the January 6th attack of insurrection on our nation's capital is that those individuals do exist and they work. They work in everyday jobs. And so all you're asking, is my understanding, is that we do not allow or provide a space for our universities to have those types of individuals employed.
That's absolutely correct. And
there's no space for those individuals here.
They shouldn't be hired in universities if they are a focus of, for example, DPS's domestic terrorism threat assessment. There are examples where there are articles that show how white supremacist groups are trying to recruit on college campuses, and there are articles that show Texas universities are not immune from these white supremacist groups. A lot of these white supremacist groups have been targeting, even nationwide. Colleges and universities saw a 7% increase of incidents where there were white supremacist campus recruiting across the country, and those incidents were in the 18-19 academic year. It said that uptick comes on top of a massive 77% of instances in white supremacist recruiting on campus during the previous academic year. This is an issue that we want to make sure if we're eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion practices, if we're trying to say that we need to ensure that we are not bringing in on board, and universities are not hiring people who have ties to these specific hate groups that are seen, that have these criminal connections. And so that's why I'm bringing this amendment.
We're not going to roll back. You don't want us to roll back any type of progress that we have made. And if by eliminating these offices that prohibit that type of behavior, you're concerned that we open ourselves up to more.
That's correct. The message that we are sending by eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion practices is a slap in the face to people of color, people who look like you and me, to students who look like you and me, to employees at universities who look like you and me. And so we want to ensure that these universities are not bringing in people who want to target us, who believe in that white supremacy, that they are better than us. And so that's why we're bringing this amendment.
There is a way, because you said DPS has a record. So there is a way for us to know who those individuals are before they are hired. So you're not creating any new practice. It's in existence. We want to make sure that it's used.
Correct.
I think you have a very valid amendment that we all should be very supportive of, because what you are doing is ensuring that all of our universities promote anti-discrimination policies that that are not to the detriment of the people that they serve. So you're just saying, if we are going to have anti-discrimination policies, this should be one of them.
Correct.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, ma'am. Move adoption.